Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of Right Wing Vegan. And I know, you probably see that title and you think, Right Wing Vegan, that's a weird thing. And it is a weird thing. And it's exactly why we wanted to do this podcast. Because we're weird people in a way.
I agree.
Because being a right-wing vegans is kind of being a niche within a niche.
Its own special thing.
It is. It's special. I like that. That's a positive spin on it. So we want to welcome everybody to this first episode. In this episode, we're going to kind of give you a breakdown on what this show is going to be. What is right-wing vegan? And then we are going to introduce kind of ourselves. Who are we and what's our story? You know, how does one become a conservative vegan? Because it seems impossible. Does it not?
No, it does. Like, the two just don't seem to blend together for some reason.
Much like oil and water, they don't. But we are here to prove that sometimes oil and water can combine to make olive oil.
Or the right-wing vegan.
Or the right-wing vegan. So, right-wing vegans, I guess.
Vegans,
There are
sorry.
two of us on this podcast. I guess I should preface and say that as well. But anyway, so we hope that you're going to come along on this journey with us. And so if you like this podcast, go ahead and subscribe to it. And give us a review, 5-star review, because obviously the more 5-star reviews we get, the more that we can spread our message and spread, you know, kind of this idea of conservatism around, because that's kind of the purpose of this podcast. So I don't want to bore everyone too much with this, because
No.
I think that we're preaching to the choir a little bit here with people listening. But one thing I do want to talk about, and Kelly, you're going to bring a unique perspective here, because your story is a little different than mine, but kind of part of the reason why we're doing this podcast is because, you know, I've been a conservative for, I like to say, the majority of my free thinking life, right? Because I can't count childhood, because as a kid, I obviously couldn't care less about politics, right? I cared about Hulk Hogan body slamming Andre the Giant. I cared about Tommy the Green Ranger kissing Kimberly the Pink Ranger, and how that affected my childhood, and how mad I was at Tommy for that, because Kimberly was my girl. And, you know, all those types of things when you're a kid, right? But around the age of high school, I really started caring about politics. And I always kind of leaned more right than left. I just have. You know, the hypocrisy of the left drove me away of it. I couldn't stand how most people who identified as progressives, because that's the nice way to say sheep or liberal. Most of those people were, their arguments for everything at the time, and again, I'll go back to that time, so I'll use this as an example, was Bush is stupid. You could say anything you wanted, and that was the response you got, right? Was, well, Bush is stupid. I mean, you could say anything. You could say this milk is expired, and they would come out and they would say, well, that's because Bush is stupid. Or they would give you the counter argument of, well, Cheney's corrupt. He's evil. He's the devil. And those were just the arguments that you got. It didn't matter how much logic you had behind your argument. It didn't matter how much research you had done. None of that was good enough. None of it mattered. It was Bush is stupid. So, you know, experiencing that and hearing them say that, and then kind of realizing, like, these are the arguments that this side is bringing to the table, I'm going to choose to go the other direction. The direction that I felt like logic and morality and, you know, just kind of free thought all kind of gathered around conservatism for me. So that's where I found myself, even at a young age, even in high school. Recently, Kelly, you and I have become vegans, and this has been a weird world for us because, you know, it's just different. As a conservative, I have a lot of liberal friends, and they blab, you know, blah, 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 and I just listen, and I don't care, right? And I can just nod my head, and that's okay. But the left is very intolerant, and vegans are traditionally liberals. and I can say that through experience now, being a vegan and being around other vegans, I can safely say that I am not at home as a vegan. I'm not. You can't walk into a vegan establishment and not hear Trump is an idiot, or Trump is the devil, or a sexist, misogynist, racist, all the ists. They love the ists. And so I can't feel at home. It's like I belong in two subcultures. I'm a conservative Republican, conservative first, who lives in that world, but then I'm also a vegan who tries to live in that world because I want to be around other people who are vegan. I want to share that with them, and a little later in this podcast we'll both go into reasons why we are vegan. But I can't, because they won't accept me for my political beliefs. So, in a way, part of the reason we're doing this podcast, at least for me, and Kelly, you can tell your story after I shut up, which apparently is going to be never.
No.
Is because there needs to be something like this, because I guarantee that we are not the only niche of a niche. You know, there are all kinds of conservatives out there. There are conservatives who are gay. There are conservatives who are black. There are conservatives who are Jewish. There are conservatives who are Hispanic. The big one, Hispanic. There are conservatives out there who belong to these groups that the left tries to grab a hold of and say, oh, you can't be in that group unless you're a liberal. You can't be in that group unless you believe that Trump is evil, or Trump is ruining this country, or there shouldn't be a wall or border protection or whatever. You can't be a vegan and feel that way, because obviously your dietary choices should be tied into the way that you feel the United States should be managed. So I'm going to shut up now, Kelly, and let you talk, because I feel like we're about 8 minutes in, and I've literally babbled the whole time. So Kelly, I'm going to let you tell kind of why you feel that we're doing this podcast.
It's interesting, because for me growing up, politics was not one of those things that I was focused on. I was centered around. I honestly could care less. Like, politics just, I didn't care. I was like, I don't think it matters who's in the White House. I don't think it matters what laws are passing, because I'm just going to continue living my life and everything will be fine. But it wasn't really until I met Scott that politics became a thing that I was focused on, and that I really woke up to realize that this is something that I need to care about. And it's funny, because we first started dating in 2012, and in early 2012, it was like April, and we're on our first date, very first date. We had just eaten dinner, and we're driving to his friend's house because his friends wanted to meet me, and we're on the freeway, and he turns to me and says, "Are you Democrat or Republican?" And I was like, this is such a weird question for a first date. Like, I don't understand this. Like, what is happening right now?
You gotta weed them out. You gotta weed them out early if they don't fit your...
I told him that I had voted Democrat, but then he asked me, okay, well, how do you feel about things? Like, because I was unsure. I told him I was kind of undecided, but yet I had voted Democrat, but I just wasn't sure. And he asked me, like, well, how do you feel about abortion and pro-choice, or... not pro-choice, but abortion and guns and all these different things. He just asked me these short, random questions. And he looked at me and he said, do you realize that the way that you answered those questions, that you are actually leaning more conservative than being liberal? And I was like, oh, I didn't even really think about that, because even though I had voted Democrat, I couldn't even tell you what the Democratic platform was about.
It's
like amazing. What the liberal platform was, because I was like, okay, well, this is who I'm supposed to vote for.
Exactly.
So that's what I did. And it wasn't until we had that interaction in the car on our first date, and I was like, oh, okay, well, this is interesting. Like, this is something that I need to pay attention to. And then over the years that we've been dating, politics is just, it's been there. It's just something that we're passionate about. We're always watching. We're always talking about it. And it's just something that we've bonded over, our values and our morals and our conservatism. Like, we're just, I don't know, we've just blended over that.
It's really interesting. You mentioned a couple things I want to touch on. One of those being, that was how I was supposed to vote. And I think it's funny that you say that, because I feel like there are a lot of people out there who vote because of what you just said.
Well, because for me, it was always painted like a picture to me that conservatives were these grumpy, old, wealthy
Rich
men,
white
who
men,
were just rude and these terrible people. So that's how it was painted to me, and it was like, oh, the Democratic Party is where all the good stuff is.
Right, that's where all the good stuff
I
is.
know.
I just threw up a little in my mouth when you said that. That's amazing to me. And growing up, I had a similar experience with that. I will say another thing. We did bond over politics, but there was specifically one issue in particular that we did bond over, and that was the issue on abortion.
Absolutely.
Reproductive choice, if you're an idiot, or murder, or whatever infanticide, which is what it's becoming now. But abortion, and I am emphatically pro-life. I am as pro-life as you can possibly be. And I have my reasons for that, which I'm sure in a future episode of this podcast we will get into. I want to do a whole episode on abortion. We'll talk about this a little later, the breakdown of what this will be, but I want to do full episodes on a lot of these really hot button and controversial topics, because I feel like they matter, and I feel like a lot of people aren't talking about them. And I will. I am not afraid. I fully understand the blowback we're going to get for this podcast, and I'm fully aware and ready to take on the left. I have a complete understanding of how vicious and awful and terrible these people are, and I have no reservations about slapping them in the face with logic. Maybe physically too, but mostly logic. I can't say I'm going to violently attack somebody, or they'll come out and call me what's an ist for that. I'm sure there is one. I don't know.
But at least you're going to throw your shield up to protect me.
Oh, I'm going to throw my shield up at these fools. I would love to just let them have it. But my story, I guess I'll try and briefly cover this. When I was a kid, around the 2000 election, obviously the controversy that surrounded that, I was very well aware of it. They called the election early. They called it for Gore, and then Bush ended up winning, and then they did all the recounts, and there was all the nonsense. And shortly after that, 9/11 happened. And this is probably a controversial story, and some people are probably going to hate me for this, but you have to understand, when I was in 10th grade, I didn't care. I didn't care about politics. I felt passionate about 9/11, right? I think everyone did. The stories I could tell about how different the world was that week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks after the attacks, it's incredible. I still remember it.
Oh yeah, it was something else.
I remember the attacks. You never forget the attacks, but I also remember just how much, even in high school, our worlds changed. But I was tasked with an assignment. I don't even remember what the assignment was, but I know I wrote a paper, and essentially because I was brainwashed, because I was young and dumb and I didn't know anything, I wrote a paper condemning the Bush administration. And my teacher at the time, probably the only conservative teacher I've ever had, he wrote an essay essentially contradicting my essay back to me. It was all written in red pen, and he gave me an F. And it was basically just, you need to check your facts. You need to look into this and this and this. And I don't know what it was about that paper. It's weird how you have these moments, and it's like, man, I went through school not caring about so many assignments, but I was so mad at this teacher for sending this paper back to me that I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to look into this. I'm going to make this guy eat his words. Yeah, I'm going to make this guy eat his words, and F Bush and all this stuff. And I started looking into it, and then I started realizing,
he's right.
The media kind of seems like one-sided in this. I feel like a lot of these reports are coming back, and And then I started looking at the situation as a whole. And everyone thinks the recounts were the problem. The recounts. Oh, all these recounts. The problem was they called the election early for Gore.
Yeah, before the counting was done.
Before everyone could vote.
Yeah.
So if I'm someone who maybe I was going to vote for Bush, but it's a little late, I just got off work. Oh, Gore already won.
What's the point?
What's the point of going to vote? They tried to hand him the election. And it was looking into that I finally understood. And I finally realized that was my first moment of, boy, the media is hypocritical. Boy, the media is in the bag for the left, aren't they? They're in the bag for the Democrats. And then as I grew up, that just became more and more prominent. And I'm the type of person where I don't like to be fooled. I really don't. And, when you try and do that to me, I'm going to passionately fight you. And that's what happened. It was that moment when I realized you're trying to pull the wool over my eyes that I said, okay, all right, well, I'm going to become a warrior of the other side. And I knew, morally, obviously, I'm a traditional person. I'm a traditional guy. I believe in traditional values. I'm not, I just don't fit in very well with the people who think that we should run around with our bras off and our ding-dongs hanging out or whatever you want to. I don't know what they do. I really don't know what kids do these days or teenagers. I'm at that age of my life. Comfest. I don't go to Comfest. I don't have anything to do with it. I don't want to see some 300-pound woman flopping around naked. I just don't want to see it. It's not for me. I'm sorry. Maybe it's for you. If it is, do your thing. But for me, no thanks. And I just, it really was, it was even more eye-opening during the election of 2004. And I really reaffirmed my values during that election because that was the Bush is stupid era. And I was in college at the time. And so you have to, man, if you went to college at that time, if you were a conservative, you were the only one. And it was you versus 18 to 20 other kids who think they know it all in your class,
Yeah, see, and that's where it's different for me because that election, I was still in high school. I couldn't vote. I was in the 10th grade, maybe? Wait, no. What year was that? 04?
04.
Yeah, so I was a freshman in high school at that point in time. So politics I didn't even care. And the first election that I could vote in was in 2008 was Obama and McCain. Yeah, that was the first election I could vote in. Yep. So I missed out on that whole Bush thing. I feel like I was robbed that because I wasn't in politics.
Oh, but when he won and I got to see all those sweet liberal tears, it was it was probably the best day of my life. Just kidding. It wasn't, but if you'd have asked me that night, it sure felt like the best day of my life. I remember watching those election results. We were at we were on campus and we were watching them, and it was just all the sad faces around me as I'm just soaking in this win.
Wait, so you remember all the sad faces when Trump won? Forget. All those people crying.
I do. I sure. Of course I. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. All the people crying, and they needed their little what was it? Their
safe space.
They needed their safe spaces so that they could go have a good cry about how Trump won the election. Boy, that tells you everything about the other side right there, doesn't it? They can't even cry babies. They can't even handle things not going their way. It's because they're spoiled brats, right? But we can get into that later. Those are a little bit of our stories. Again, actually, Kelly, I guess I can tell this story if you want, or you can tell it about us becoming vegan.
Yeah, we might as well.
Yeah.
Because you kind of led the charge
I did.
On that. That was something that I sheepishly followed you on.
It's so weird because it's people hear I'm vegan and I know they associate me with hipsters and I know they associate me with other soy boys and I know they think man, this guy is probably a skinny jean wearing, mustache curling,
beanie wearing,
bag carrying, micro brew drinking dude, and I am not, man. I'm the opposite. I do wear a good flannel every now and then, and I do have some tighter jeans, but that's not by choice. I became a vegan because honestly, for me, and I'm going to say this, and again, one thing you're going to find is we are not going to preach to you about veganism on this show. We might talk about health because it is an important thing for us. particularly me, preserving life. And I do want to help guide people towards just, things that might preserve your lives, especially if you're a conservative listening to this podcast. Listen, man, we need you. We need you to live as long as you possibly can, because we need those votes for as long as we can possibly get them. We are fighting a war, guys, and if you don't think we are, you need to get woke. That's what liberals say, right? You need to get woke, because we are, and we need your votes forever. And so I'm going to do everything I can to help give you guys information to preserve your life. And I'm passionate about nutrition. I lost 100 pounds. At this point, it was like 5 years ago, because I got passionate. I ran into my own health scares, and I got passionate about health. And so I'm passionate about politics and health. And I want to help, even if you guys are like, you know what, I don't want to hear about the health crap. I don't care. Let me do what I want to do. That's fine. But maybe you'll take one little tiny thing away, and that'll give you another voting seat, another 4 years, and we can I don't know. I'm joking about the vote thing. Obviously, I want everyone to do well. But the veganism thing for me was, A, putting my money where my mouth is, and B, just there's a lot of, I won't go into it, but there's a lot of scientific evidence that a plant-based diet is pretty healthy and can provide you with a lot of good health benefits. So I'll let you look into that. You can do your research on plant-based nutrition and a plant-based diet. I like to say that I'm more plant-based than vegan, because it's just
they're still different.
They're still different, and people put a negative connotation on the vegan thing. And I'll tell you this, like, for moral reasons, I feel that if I'm going to tell people that I value life and I'm pro-life, then I need to put my money where my mouth is, and I need to be pro-all life, because I don't want to give the left that argument. Any chance that I get to take an argument away from the imbeciles, I'm going to take that argument away. And when you tell people you're pro-life, one argument that they'll throw at you, and if you've never heard this, you will as this type of stuff becomes more popular, but you eat chicken and you eat beef, so you're not pro-all life, because if you were, you wouldn't be able to eat the animals. So now they can't say that to me. They can't say it to me, because I don't eat that. So it takes that bullet out of their chamber. Now when I tell people I value all life, if they come back to me and they try and drop that on me, then I can say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm a vegan. I don't eat meat, but you still kill babies. So
yes,
something inappropriate. So it. That's just how it is. So I anytime that I get a chance to take bullets out of their chamber, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to try and live life the way that my morals and my values lead me. And again, I'm not going to preach to anybody about how you should live your life. You live your life the way you want to live it, and I'm not going to attack you for it, because conservatives actually really believe that. Liberals, they say they believe that, but then they
stab you
intolerant of what they perceive as your lack of tolerance. However, I feel tolerant of everybody. Even if I don't agree with you, I can still be in the room with you. I can still have a conversation with you, and I can still like you as a person. Is there anything you want to add to that? I don't know if I...
No, I mean, I feel like you covered that pretty well, because you ventured down the path of veganism to make to match, to put your money where your mouth is what you said. And I kind of followed along, because I wasn't much of a dairy meat eater person to begin with, and seeing the positive effects that it was having on Scott made me want to just fully make that switch. So I did, and it's been the best thing I've ever experienced. It wasn't at first, like, I never really thought of it as being like, oh, well, I can't be fully anti-abortion and value human life so much that I'm ignoring the lives of other beings that are innocent, just as innocent. And that's what kind of drove me to that.
Yeah, and I'm not, again, I don't want to criticize anyone who listens to this podcast who is pro-life but still eats meat.
No, not at all.
Yeah, we're not saying that you're wrong. It's just
for us morally.
Yeah, inside of our minds, right? This is kind of the path we had to go down. And also, I just think, like, what, again, it also, one other thing it does, I'll say this and then I'll leave it alone. I get asked a lot, how do you feel? That's one of the questions I get asked so much is like, A, where do I get my protein?
That's the big one.
That's the big one, which I do have an answer for. I get it from nuts, legumes, beans. I do get protein. Don't worry. I get over 100 grams of protein a day. I do lift weights. I'm not a soy boy. And the other question I get is, how do you feel now that you've made that change? And the answer I can honestly say, and it's probably the best answer anybody can hear, is I don't feel any different. And I know like some people are probably like, oh, you feel, great after. Why don't you feel great? You switched to plant-based. And you know what? I've been plant-based for 6 months. I might feel better and just not be cognizant of it because this is my new normal. This is how I feel, but I don't feel any worse. And I think that's the key because everyone always is concerned about me and they're concerned about the nutrients that I'm getting. And I have to tell everyone that I don't feel any worse. So there is that. Has my athletic performance gotten better? I don't know. Actually, probably, but I don't know. Do I sleep better at night? No. I don't know. I don't get enough sleep. I can tell you that.
No, we don't get enough sleep.
But it's kind of one of those things where I've taken a bullet out of their chamber. I've taken the climate change bullet out of their chamber because they can't come after me for that because, being plant-based, I leave less of a carbon footprint on the earth, so they can't come after me for that. Yeah. So I'm basically just taking bullets out of their chamber of their usual hit pieces they like to throw at people, right? And anytime I can do that, I've won. I've won a little battle. So that covers the veganism. We want. So I guess I'll briefly touch on this, Kelly. What we hope to gain out of this podcast is to spread another conservative voice out there because there needs to be more conservative voices out there, and we need to not be afraid of the left. They try and scare us, and they try and shut us up, and they try and shut us down. And I've experienced a lot of this in my life, of the left personally attacking me to try and shut me up.
Yeah, and it's like, in times you just feel it's easier not to say anything and just kind of sit back and listen, but this is our way to actually have a voice.
It is, and I'm done. I'm done sitting there not saying anything. I've decided that this election is probably, and I probably say this every election. Matter of fact, I can vividly remember going back to one of the times Obama was running and saying, this is the most important election of our life. But I actually really do believe that because the country's in a place right now where it's incredibly divisive. And we have to defend morality. We have to defend traditional values, and we have to defend conservatism because it is under attack, folks. And not only is conservatism under attack, but democracy in and of itself is under attack. And if we don't stand up, if we don't be the voice that drowns these people out, these sheep out, then I'm telling you right now, I'm here to tell you, it's going to spread like wildfire because a lot of people don't understand what socialism is. And the more that the media, the more that the idiots in the media are going to put positive affirmation behind that word, the more young, dumb people are going to start to believe it.
They're impressionable.
They're impressionable, and there needs to be voices like ours and voices like yours, if you're listening to this podcast, to drown these people out. So that's part of why we want to do this podcast. Also, we're a niche within a niche, and we want to prove that conservatives are accepting of people who are different. We are, the Democrats come out and they say, oh, we're the party of inclusion. We're the party of diversity.
Nope.
Unless you disagree with them, and then they don't like you very much.
And you're the worst person ever.
Yeah, or white. If you're white, we don't want anything to do with you either, by the way, if you're the Democrats. They don't want anything to do with you. They're so diverse that they forget that to put white people in their little picture of diversity. So not very diverse. They also don't like men, but that's a different topic. But we want to prove that conservatives actually are inclusive. Conservatives will accept you. You know what? They don't have to agree with you, but they'll, again, like I said earlier, they'll sit in a room, they'll have a beer with you, they'll talk to you, they'll accept you for who you are. We don't have to agree with each other, but we can still play nice with each other. And I think this podcast and us with our being vegan, I think we're going to hopefully come out to prove that conservatives are accepting.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I want to do.
We're not evil.
We're not evil. This podcast is going to be controversial at times. And I say that because I'm not going to filter myself. And
you don't have a filter to begin with.
I don't have a filter. And I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to say some controversial things on this podcast. I am probably going to become infamous because of this podcast, and that's fine with me. The reality is that controversial things sometimes need to be said because they are the truth. We can dress them up as much as we want, and we can pretty them up, but you put lipstick on a pig and it's still a pig. And I truly believe that some of these things, they need to be said, and people are just too afraid to say them. So I'm going to say them. So just, keep that in mind. We'll keep this clean, but we're also going to talk about some controversial topics.
Now, I'm kind of more of the quieter voice who you're definitely the loud one over there, and I'm just the one that kind of sneaks in. But
yeah, I got my MAGA hat. Yeah, so we hope that you guys will come along for the ride with us. And again, we hope that you'll subscribe to this podcast, that you'll comment on this podcast. I plan on setting up an email for this podcast. I hope that we get some emails. I'm sure we'll get some emails from people who disagree with us.
Oh, yeah, probably.
So I would love to get some emails from people who do agree with us. I may set up a line for people to call if this podcast picks up steam and people want to join us and talk to us and conversate with us about politics or even veganism. But please, when we get the email set up on the next episode, I'll try and have that done, and we'll get that out to you guys. And I really hope that you engage with us, and I really hope that you involve yourself in this process. And we're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to share some activism opportunities for people. We're going to, we're going to try and find ways to involve ourselves and to involve you in this process. Because again, guys, this is an incredibly important election, and we need to make sure that Donald J. Trump remains our president. And we need to do everything we can to make sure that happens. So I think that's it. Is that it? Do you have anything else you want to add to this?
I feel like that was what we wanted to cover.
Yeah.
So
this is an introductory episode. We wanted to introduce ourselves to you guys and get this out there. And next week we're going to come back with a couple topics. We're going to talk about the Democratic debates, which I tried to watch last night.
Oh man, it was rough. It was so difficult.
Ugh.
We had to turn it off.
We did have to turn it off. We turned it off.
We were getting so angry. We had to walk away from it.
It was definitely angering. The softball questions that were just lobbed to them. The little those phrases that they just respond with. The whole just a bunch of buffoonery. The love of socialism, the love of just open borders and no laws and just let's free roam. I can't wait till we get to the immigration episode because Kelly and I have a very personal story that we can tell during that episode. So that'll be a real passionate one. But
oh yes,
I just can't. I'm gonna try and watch tonight's. I'm gonna try.
We've got like an hour.
It's gonna be so hard.
Prepare ourselves.
But I'm gonna try, and we're gonna do our next week. We're gonna talk all about them, and we're gonna talk about some of the topics that get brought up, and we'll have some brief discussion about what we think of the candidates and what we think of MSNBC, who is moderating the debate. Nothing moderate about it, but we'll talk about that. We're also gonna go into a brief discussion about why I feel, and I can't wait to get Kelly's opinion on this.
Oh no!
But why I feel this is the most divisive election in the history of this country.
Oh, it's so divisive.
And I think we're going to talk about that. Maybe we'll give some of our personal experiences on that as well.
Yeah.
Because I think we both have experienced some anguish because of our political beliefs there, and I can't wait to get into that. Anything else you want to say, Kelly?
No, I don't know. I'm just excited. I'm excited to talk about this, and I'm excited to have this platform where we can actually talk about how we feel and what we're thinking about these things, these important issues that people need to be considering and thinking about.
They do.
So I'm glad to have this platform. I'm glad to have listeners hearing us talk about this and our perspectives and viewpoints on things. So I'm just excited to get started.
Absolutely. And hopefully you, the listener out there, if you are listening to this, maybe you are a niche of a niche. Maybe you are a conservative vegan as well. And if you are, man, we want to hear from you.
Yes.
But if you're a gay conservative, if you're just one of those niche of niches, if you're one of those folks who are supposed to be Democrat, you got a home here, man, and a place here. And we're going to definitely connect with you guys because because we relate. So thank you for listening. Hopefully you'll join us for our next episode, and we will talk to you guys later.